to the 5th season of the Coaching Cast, your working from home club. We're here to remind you that you're not alone, that we're in this together, all striving to make sense of today's working world. Regardless of where you're working right now or whatever you do as a career, we've got something for you here at the Coaching Cast. I'm Lisa, founder of Grip Corporate Coaching, personal performance coach, leader and chief eye roller when it comes to all nonsensical corporate mumbo jumbo which suffocates rather than advocates.
And I'm Susie, coach and trainer at Future You Business Coaching, currently taking on my hardest coaching assignment to date, parenting a 2-year-old who doesn't take too kindly to being questioned.
In this podcast, we explore all the things impacting you, our CBBs, at work right now, presenting different topics each episode, which we will discuss with some special guests along the way, sharing ideas, hints, and tips for you to take away and try for yourself, as well as having a few laughs. We hope you enjoy listening. So, the one-to-one, it's a term that has the ability to make us all feel really uncomfortable in the same way, I think, as feedback does. In this episode, we're going to discuss and debate how to achieve the ideal one-to-one as the facilitator and the recipient, as regardless of levels and roles, we may all experience a one-to-one at some point, and it has the opportunity to benefit all of us when both conducted right, but also engaged with effectively. So stay with us and enjoy. So before we dive into this topic then around how to have a one-to-one or a decent one-to-one, Suze, talk to me. You've been away, I've been away, we've been in different places. Tell me how you are.
We're back in Blighty.
We are back in Blighty. I'm back. I'm back in the UK as of last night.
Lisa has landed.
Yeah.
She is back. We are in the same country.
Woohoo.
Yeah, good times ahead. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, so I've also been away on holiday. I mentioned it, I think, in the episode previously. So been to the south of France, back now. Very nice. Yeah, a couple of weeks away. Weather was nice, ate some nice food, drank some nice wine. Wine is so cheap in France. It's like €3 a glass for a really decent wine. I was like,
that was like South Africa as well. Like the reality of coming back. I'm not going to be able to afford to go to the pub.
I know, tell me about it. So yeah, it was really good. Bit of a nightmare kind of start and finish from a travel perspective.
Oh God.
So obviously there's been a lot of press about airports, mainly Manchester Airport, and I have to say we didn't have the best experience in Manchester Airport. So first off, we landed in France, waiting for luggage. My suitcase came through. My little boy's suitcase came through, not my husband's. So my husband had no clothes for 5 days.
Oh my God. As I said, it is my worst nightmare. I
God.
have anxiety every time I get to an airport about whether or not my bag is going to come off the carousel. And actually, my anxiety is higher about whether or not Dom's comes off. I don't know why. I think I will be stressed, but it's having to deal with someone else's stress, and Dom can get into such a tiz about things like this and have a tantrum, and then I can't deal with that. So I'm always like, please say his bag comes off.
Well, I felt so sorry for Steve, my husband, because he literally had the clothes he was wearing. That was it. And we had another bag which had some bits in it which weren't kind of too important. But anyway, so we started off our holiday in the south of France at Decathlon, which I'd been to previously 3 days before in Stockport, and it's exactly the same. Yeah, pretty much. In terms of the shop and the how it's all set up, etc. So he was running around with 5 minutes to spare before it actually shut to try and get some flip-flops and shorts, etc. So yeah, that was an interesting start to our holiday. And then when we flew back after our holiday, Manchester Airport, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It was an absolute shit show.
Oh God.
3 hours from getting off the plane, waiting in the luggage arrival kind of bit for our luggage to get taken off the plane and put on the carousel with a toddler. Small space, what felt like thousands of people. There weren't thousands, but there was a lot of people in this one space, not much communication, etc. Yeah, it wasn't the best end to the holiday. And yeah, lots of unhappy people, understandably. So get it, they're understaffed, etc. But like, you've taken my money.
Yeah.
So you need to kind of
sort it out, Manchester Airport.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So that wasn't great, but there were some highlights in between. So I have to tell you the story because it wasn't my finest moment.
Oh God.
Where we went, there's not many people who are confident speaking English. So English isn't particularly kind of well-versed. And my French is also not particularly well-versed. Anyway, so we kind of were in this very nice town. We sat down for this really nice lunch, and I had on like a vest top, and it had like a V-neck at the front and at the back. So I got this, the spray sun cream, like Nivea sun cream, other brands are available. And I was sat on the seat, and I was like squirting behind me, like the top of my back, my shoulders. And then this kind of waitress kind of appeared from behind me, and I was like, oh my gosh. It was like instantly, I didn't think. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Did I just spray you with this like sun cream? And kind of like held it like, did I spray you with this sun cream? She had no idea what I was saying, right? And then she kind of said something back, and I was like, I had no idea, but I was still holding the sun cream. She thought I wanted her to put sun cream on my back.
Oh my goodness.
She started to try and take it out of my hand. And then I was like, oh, no. And she was like, no. And I was like, no. And I was like, oh God, this is so confusing. So to the point, my husband was just pissing himself at me because it was like lost in translation.
Oh God.
And then we kind of managed to kind of facilitate it, that she was clear that I didn't need her to put sun cream on my back, and she thought I was an absolute weirdo. And so then the whole time, like, I was just so sheepish when she came back to the table each time with our drinks and food, etc. Like, it was so embarrassing. Oh my God. So
did she actually apply the sun cream on for you?
She didn't, no, but she went to take it out of my hand to do it, because that's what she thought I was asking her to do when I was trying to apologize for what I thought was squirting her. Oh God. So it was like a holiday shame, but yeah, it was a bit embarrassing, that I have to say. The language barrier was challenging. I'm not going to lie, because my GCSE French is literally no longer in my brain. A lot has happened since I took that GCSE, for sure.
Oh my goodness.
I've not retained it. So yeah, that was quite a funny situation. And yeah, no, a good time was had by all. But I have a question for you, actually. I need you to tell me, how was the Dubai Bottomless Brunch?
It was really good. The Bottomless Brunch was good. It was definitely on the more, I think, conservative end of brunches. So in Dubai, there's a lot of choice around the Saturday brunch parties that you can go to. And I think, as I explained in the last episode, when I was talking about this trip, I was explaining that we've done a lot of research, and it's about trying to find the right one for us. Because if I was going with like you and my mates, it would have been, I know the sort of brunch I would have liked to have gone to, but it definitely didn't suit my husband. So it was trying to find the right one. But the one we picked, it was very nice. It was very civilized. So we went to Tasca, which is the Portuguese brunch at the Mandarin Oriental, and it was very cool. But because of COVID as well, I think things have changed in so much as definitely a lot more hotels are doing seated brunches, and the food gets brought to you. So you don't actually have the self-serve and go up and it's huge big buffet style. And actually that's very nice, because, it's very civilized. You just take a seat.
Yeah.
And everything gets brought to you. And there was a lot of food still, and a lot of alcohol. So yeah, we had a great time. It was amazing. And the food was unbelievable. Like, much more, it was a lot nicer than I was expecting. So I highly recommend it. If anyone's going to Dubai, go to the Tasca brunch, the Portuguese themed brunch at the Mandarin. It's wonderful. And you get great views there of the city. So you can see like Burj Khalifa, and it's cool.
Do you know what? I've never been to a Bottomless Brunch in the UK.
You haven't done a UK one either?
No.
What?
No.
You haven't lived, love. Yeah, no, I've done quite a lot, but I used to live in London, and they were big in London, so I did quite a few in London, because a lot of the different hotels, well, I don't know if they still do, but it was a real thing at a certain point. So I've done quite a few in London.
She's a pro, everyone.
They are amazing. I mean, you pay like, most of them are pretty reasonable. I think like some of the ones in London, they're usually under 50 quid. And it's like literally all you can eat and all you can drink for however many hours. But yeah, it's really good fun. I mean, you've got like Bunga Bunga is quite a famous one, which is the pizza one in Clapham, which I've never done. Or Battersea it might be. I've never done that one. That's like bottomless Prosecco and as much pizza as you want. And it turned into like it's like a disco in the day. So it's quite surreal.
Now we're talking.
That's quite hard to get into. That's quite hard to get into. It's so popular. Well, it always was anyway. But I'm not a Prosecco fan. So I can't do bottomless Prosecco. I'm just like, ugh. No, not for me. But yeah, the brunch was great. Considering we landed at like 5 a.m. on the Saturday, and I had the worst night's sleep on the flight over from Cape Town. We literally like got into the hotel, unpacked, had a couple of hours around the pool.
Got some selfies in.
Got some hilarious. No selfies. So yeah, I've never seen anything like it as I've seen in Dubai. Oh my god, like
it's selfie central.
It is ridiculous. Like it's quite scary actually, and sad that like our generation have grown up with social media to the point where your promotion of yourself on social media platforms is like the norm. Like that's what you do. And like pictures that you take of yourself and the way, honestly, I've never seen anything like what I've seen in Dubai. It was hilarious. There's a really great Instagram page called Influencers in the Wild. I don't know if you know of it.
No.
It is hilarious. You should start following it now. And it's essentially where people take footage of other people doing selfies. And it is so funny. Well, my husband got loads of stuff and he sent it to Influence in the Wild to see if they'll share it.
Oh my gosh.
Because there were so many funny things.
Oh gosh.
Like, just, honestly. I mean, I'm vain. Like, I think everyone has an element of vanity.
Come on, like,
but
yeah,
oh my God. Sure. Like, I'm not that vain. Like,
I mean, I'm trying to get like random waitresses to flip and put sun cream on me. Like, we're all vain, love. Like
that's sun protection. That's protecting yourself from skin cancer. That's practical. There's nothing vain about that. But like, yeah, the stuff I saw out there, it got to the point where I was like, God, it's just a bit sad. I was just like,
but who has the freaking time? I do not have the time.
Well, these people have time. They
dedicating hours to getting the perfect picture. Like,
well, they did.
Lisa
I've never seen anything like it.
We obviously take pictures of us when we're recording for social,
yeah,
but they're like literally terrible. And they're like, once Lisa's figured out how to do it every time, because there's a story there, like she forgets every time.
I forget every time I have to do it, yeah.
So we have to Google it each week. But once we've Googled it and then we take a picture, we're literally like there, just kind of like any old face, any old situation.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the time, love. We're on to the next thing. We're busy working women. Yeah.
I'm not that vain either. I mean, like, I don't like looking shit. Like that's the reality. I'm not gonna sit here and go, oh, I don't give a shit what I look like. That is nonsense.
Yeah,
I do give a shit what I look like. Like, I'm like everybody else. I don't like ugly pictures of me existing and being shared.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, like, I don't take myself seriously enough and I don't try hard enough. So there's got to come to a point where you're like, you can't have everything. Like, I don't bother putting makeup on for this podcast ever. So if my face looks a bit ropey, it's because I didn't put any makeup on. Like, you can't have it every which way. Like, I've got a ginormous spot on the end of my chin, which is blatantly from wearing masks in Dubai because it was bloody boiling. Thank God I don't have to wear a mask here now anymore. But yeah, I can't be asked to cover that up. So that features in the podcast. It's you, me, and my ginormous spot on my chin.
Wow. What a segue into this week's episode.
Yeah, the one-to-one.
The one-to-one.
Yeah.
Literally. I think we should probably move on.
Yeah, so come on then, you, me, and my big spot. Let's get on with this episode. So yes, the one-to-one. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode of the Coaching Cast. For those of us who work in organisations, no matter the size, small, medium or large, we're all familiar with it. It's something which should be happening for us regularly, and its purpose is intended to be positive. And yet, why do so many of us dread them? You, our CBBs, have told us that you want to learn more about how to facilitate a good one-to-one with your team members and understand ways in which you can guarantee more effective, productive sessions. So we're going to talk about the one-to-one today from lots of different perspectives. We're going to talk about it from the real basics of like, what's the point of having a one-to-one? What's its purpose? What are the roles that are at play in a one-to-one? Let's talk about responsibility and accountability, because I think that's going to be an interesting one. And then how the one-to-one should be set up for the benefit of everybody, because I think that's the point here. It actually is for the benefit of all people taking part. So to put it simply, and to help both of us out, because we're both straight off flights and holidays, we're going to start really simply at the beginning, which is like, what do you think the purpose of the one-to-one is, Suze?
Well, it is a great question. That is for sure. So I would definitely say, and it's actually an important question, first off, because I don't think, in my experience, not all one-to-ones are created the same. That may be a controversial statement, that may not be, but I believe that not all one-to-ones are created the same. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can have lots of different types of one-to-ones. You can have performance one-to-ones. You can have project one-to-ones, where you might talk about an update on a project or some deliverables or timescales. You can have well-being one-to-ones. You can have objective review one-to-ones, perhaps with a more formal kind of like objective review, like mid-year, end of year, etc. You can have one-to-ones where it's about escalating things and asking for help and seeking help. So they are so vast in terms of their scope, and they are not all created the same. And actually, their purpose can equally be quite different. So I think for me and my experience, actually, it took me quite a long time to figure that out. I think that when you kind of start managing and leading people, I certainly kind of first off early on in my kind of management career thought that a one-to-one was quite set. And I think it is to an extent, which I think we'll probably come on to in a second. But actually, what you get chatting about can be very, very vast and can cover a lot of stuff in quite a short piece of time. And that can go off onto tangents, and then it goes from there, etc. So really, I think my first kind of thought is the purpose of a one-to-one, to kind of break it down and more simply, is opportunities to connect, to update, to seek help and support, to check in. Again, the list is endless, which probably isn't necessarily very helpful. But I think it's important that we actually kind of recognize that and talk about it, because it can be quite confusing and we can overcomplicate it, I think.
Oh, God, yeah. Like, I think you've nailed it. Overcomplicate. I feel this way about so much, though, in respect of the working world and anything that involves people. I think we sometimes forget, like, what the fundamental basic foundation of what we're talking about is, which is you're having a chat.
Yeah.
Like, it's not actually much more complicated than that. I think actually the biggest challenge really with one-to-ones in the first place is that people forget that it is a conversation. A conversation therefore means it's two-way. One person isn't doing all the talking. It's about the two individuals involved talking and engaging with one another. And you use the word connection, which I think is spot on. That's exactly what it is. It's an opportunity to connect with each other. And it's about creating the space for it to be able to happen and committing to it, because it's recognizing that it's actually important. Because when we're all working day in, day out, especially more so now, I think that so many of us are predominantly still working remotely. So you're not physically together and you're not seeing each other. Actually, when there is a lot going on, a lot of job, tasks, priorities required to be done, activities, if you're customer facing, you've got customers that you need to see. Actually, making the time and protecting it to actually connect in with your team, whether that's you connecting with your manager connecting with you connecting with your team, whatever, is even more important. Because otherwise, time flies, and before you know it, you realize you actually haven't spoken to the people who are important for your role, for your, success, who can support you. You haven't spoken to them.
Yeah.
So I think it is that kind of recognizing that it's a conversation just with a different title. It's called a one-to-one, but I mean, it is
Absolutely.
just a chat.
And I think the saying is still, it sounds quite formal, like one-to-one.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And to Lisa's point, it's just a chat.
It's a conversation.
Yeah? And actually, I think that conversation, or that kind of purpose of that conversation, is still applicable. So if you're a CBB listening to this and thinking, well, I know we know a lot of you work for yourself or have your own business, perhaps have a small team or a couple of freelancers or whatever it is that kind of it looks like for you. This principle still absolutely applies, because it is a conversation, and conversations happen all the time. And there's perhaps some ways which we're going to kind of come on to about how you can perhaps structure that conversation, but they are still really important conversations to have, kind of regardless of your work setup. They're probably more formalized, maybe in larger organizations, in my experience anyway, but there's still a really critical part of success of when you've got people around you who you need to kind of link in with, engage with, help motivate. This is a critical part of that. I think I probably view it slightly differently. It's more of a challenge than a stigma, but I think that's because of the perhaps experiences I've had so far in my career. I think the challenge is, and I was actually talking to my friend about this, because I said we were doing an episode on this, and she was like, oh, interesting. It is a really interesting subject. And she said something really profound, which I was like, oh, yes, that's absolutely spot on, which is, I think there's a challenge around it because we don't get taught how to do it. We don't get taught how to do it well or properly. And so we don't know what good looks like a lot of the time. And so there's a temptation there as well, because as I said before, because the remit of a one-to-one can be so broad as well, there's a temptation there, I think, to kind of get carried away and put too much either into them to cover off in the time that you've got, not necessarily then value them or know how to actually conduct a really effective one-to-one where you can have a two-way conversation with that other person and kind of just, like you said, just kind of stop, reset, come out of the day-to-day, perhaps get some new ideas, get some help, get some support, share some information and kind of go again. So I think one of the challenges is around we don't actually know how to do them very well because we don't kind of put them in, certainly in my experience, not saying this for everyone, but certainly in my corporate career anyway, like I was never taught how to run a good one-to-one. I don't know about you. No. I kind of just figured it out myself, how my manager did it with me, what I kind of felt worked, what I didn't. It kind of evolved over time. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, not at all.
It needs to evolve.
No, I think that's more natural, to be honest. I think that's the natural evolution, but it still takes conscious effort.
Absolutely.
It takes a conscious effort to go, I want this one-to-one to be useful to me. And I think you have to have that level of consideration and care for others when you become a manager to enable them to have the same, in terms of saying this, time is important for both of us. And I want the time that we're spending now to be worthwhile for both of us, and like respecting that. So ensuring that actually you're doing everything you can that's within your control to ensure the time therefore is useful to everybody, and that the way you're setting it up therefore is productive. But that takes conscious effort. Like you can't just expect that to just happen unless you're really putting the thought into it, I think.
I like what you just said there about that point around conscious effort, which kind of leads nicely into what I was going to say around, a lot of the time the challenge is that they get cancelled a lot. They get deprioritized out of the diary into more 100%. Functional, performance related things. Day to day, we need to just get done. And actually, I think that means we don't then put necessarily value on it, value as the facilitator, or value perhaps also as the recipient. And I was thinking about why that is. And I think what you said there about conscious effort is spot on, because actually, if you are involved and participating and creating an effective one-to-one conversation, it involves thinking. It involves listening. And actually, they are two quite hard things to do that involve conscious effort. Because if you're not conscious about it, you won't listen as well.
No.
You won't be planned out or thinking about what you need to achieve and what your objective is for this conversation. And that's why we deprioritize it, because that's hard.
Yeah.
That means we have to stop as the facilitator often, and even as the recipient as well, stop and think for ourselves, okay, how where am I going with this use of time? Like what's the right purpose? What's the objective? What's the goal here, etc. And I think that's why one of the challenges is they often get deprioritized, because we don't put value on some of that stuff which we feel is a bit harder to do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think it's that, and I think it's the fact that people continue to miss the point. You know, a good one-to-one doesn't have to often be much more than a chat. It just doesn't. Like, I think there's an element of devaluing the time and devaluing the action of meeting on a one-to-one basis, just the two of you, and having that 30 minutes even of nothing really in particular, actually, but just taking the time to be together and check in.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of devaluing actually how important that actually can be. And especially how important that becomes when it's done repeatedly as a habit over time, because that's what helps to establish relationships, trust. It's what enables you to really start learning about one another and becoming more attuned to what's going on for each other. Now, that may not happen in the first 30 minutes you ever speak to one another, but it definitely probably will on the 5th or 6th time if you continue to do it and commit to doing it on a regular basis.
Like, when I reflect back on some of my one-to-ones in my corporate career, mainly with a particular manager, actually, like, you said something just there about the way you turn up, the way you're present, the way you conduct yourself in those situations, hopefully then leads, you do that in a respectful and in a positive way, that kind of then leads hopefully to more communication informally and those kind of serendipitous moments, for sure, like, absolutely. But you also can have the flip of that, which I experienced, which was I would have a one-to-one with a particular manager and they would be late. They would rush in and like sit down. We'd always have to do it as well in like a public environment, which I didn't find particularly like comfortable all of the time, because you just also weren't necessarily like conscious of like who was around you, who could be awake maybe, you know. And I was just kind of like, you know, if we're talking about well-being, for example, not that we did every time, but you know, that everybody's got well-being, and we've talked about it. We're big advocates of it on this podcast. But some people might not be comfortable talking about that in a public, you know, setting and environment, for example. But anyway, they'd kind of rush in, sit down, order a coffee, laptop would go up, phone would be vibrating. They'd be looking around like who's coming in, who's going out of this kind of setting, catch someone's eye, be like, hi. And I'm like, well, I just wanted to talk to you about these things. So then it becomes very transactional, because I'm like, I've got this really short amount of time to catch this person's attention. And I need to get some stuff like checked in, or I need to get some progress on some things, boom, boom, boom. And it's kind of like, then it becomes really transactional. And then I would leave those one-to-ones being like, well, that was just really shit, actually. Like, really frustrating. Didn't feel like I really connected or talked to that person, or they were interested in who I was. And I actually then found like our communication in other aspects then, like whether they rang me or whether they bumped into them in the office or whatever, like I just found those interactions then actually like equally as awkward and kind of like, this doesn't work for me, because to your point, like we just hadn't taken this time just to have a chat and have a conversation. There was always an agenda, like a formal agenda there, and like it just didn't work for me. Just didn't get the best out of me. Yeah.
And I think what you've articulated there is, again, it comes back to this whole, what we tend to miss the point of with these simple transactions, which is the value we give to others when we give them our full attention and we listen. It's such a small gesture, but it's so meaningful. Like
oh my God.
It's so important. And I think too often people dismiss that. They don't appreciate it. Now, I think a big part of this will always come down to the fact that we're all different. We operate differently.
For sure.
What we each value is different. Our preferences are different. You know, I'm saying that having a conversation is a simple activity and it's straightforward and we're overcomplicating it. But that's because I feel comfortable having conversations, and many of us don't. And there are plenty of people who are in leadership positions who do struggle with even that social interaction. It's just not their forte. That's not their skill set. They have other strengths, and that's what lends themselves to being strong leaders. But actually the area they need to improve on is even just the art of a conversation. But I think what everyone has to recognize when they are in a management role, and therefore they are the facilitator of these conversations, it's whether you're comfortable with it or not, it's tough. Like, you have to start, you can't use that as the excuse. You have to start realizing and recognizing how important being listened to is for people, and having that time and that attention and that focus. And just from doing something that's actually quite small and straightforward, it can mean a huge amount. And it's not really that difficult to do. Like,
no,
I know for me, I've been in similar situations, and those managers who I had the best relationships with were those who gave me their time and who I could see had really full agendas on a daily basis. And they had meetings with, you know, our senior leadership team and higher. They had big responsibilities. They had high leadership on projects with big budgets and, you know, huge objectives. But the one thing they always did was protect our time together. And that was always a non-negotiable. And even if something occurred out of their control, which meant they had to adjust our meeting, it was rare, and they would be apologetic and they would acknowledge the inconvenience to me and, you know, apologize for anything, you know, disappointing me, I guess. But it would always then be very quickly rescheduled. But those were the managers who I had the best relationships with, because they actually gave me their time. And I felt as though we both appreciated it.
Yeah. You've actually just reminded me of a story as well. I was in a one-to-one in my career, and it was in like a little meeting room, and somebody walked past the meeting room who my line manager wanted to speak, and I was like, or was waiting to speak to, or needed to speak to, or something. And I was like mid-flow conversation, and they were just like, oh, hang on, sorry. And they just got up and left the room and went to speak to this person, right? So I was like, oh, right, okay. So I'll just sit there. They never came back. So
what?
Yeah, I just remembered this. They never came back. So I remember just being sat there. I was like, okay, 10 minutes has passed now. Okay, maybe this is quite a long conversation. Okay, 15 minutes has passed now. Okay, are they coming back? I don't think they kept. So I was like ringing them, weren't answering their phone. I genuinely don't know to this day what actually happened, but I remember they never came back. So I just like packed all my stuff up and just kind of carried on with my day. But it was the weirdest experience. I've actually forgotten that until you were just saying about that point there. How strange is that? But that's an example of where something which can be, and hopefully is to many of you, quite straightforward. Yeah, as in just have a conversation, just give somebody your time and your attention. When you don't do that, the impact on that other individual. So for me, the impact for me at that time, I was just like, okay, this person like doesn't value me, doesn't value my presence and what I've got to share enough, versus the person they had to leave the one-to-one for to go and speak to at that very moment in time and never come back.
But that's just fucking rude.
Odd, isn't it?
But it's just rude. That's just like, that doesn't even, it's not even about this conversation as to like, how do you have a decent one-to-one? That's just about being a decent human being. That's just rude. It's so disrespectful. I can't believe that happened to you.
I know. I'd actually forgotten about that. Do you know what? You just prompted that. Then I was like, oh my God, yeah, that happened.
And like, I know people will say, oh, well, things happen in business and things happen, you've got to deal with stuff urgently. But I'm like, yeah, there's never an excuse for that, though. There's never anything that urgent. Like, no one's dying. You and I haven't worked in industry. Actually, I did work in the energy industry for a very long time, and that could be dangerous at certain points, but I never worked in a power station. So technically, no, the most dangerous thing that ever happened was like Beryl, tripped over her high heels and got a,
Or you did when you got up to go to the loo. I think that's been a workplace shame story.
It has, when I got my shoes put into one of another and landed flat on my face on the office floor. Yeah, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing really dangerous happened. And similarly, in that situation, I mean, it's just bloody rude. It's so basic. But this is when I think, when we talk about the basics of this, it's just about being a human being and recognizing that we are humans. And a massive part of our working career is about relationships. That's really the theme of like a lot of what you and I talk about in this podcast. It does nearly always fundamentally come down to the most common theme in all of this is that it's about people working with people. It's about relationships. It's about communication. That's all this is about as well, which is just being respectful to one another and acknowledging that actually having time together, just the two of you, is helpful just to check in and see what's going on.
Yeah. No more complicated than that, guys.
It is not more complicated than that. So you've clearly pointed out what an unsuccessful one-to-one is when someone decides just to leave halfway through and doesn't come back. So flip side,
sounds a bit like a date, doesn't it?
Yeah. Flip side, how would you describe let's keep with the term one-to-one. Like we've explained, break it down. It's a chat. It's a really decent conversation. It's just time together. But for the purpose of this, we'll call it a one-to-one. How would you describe a successful one-to-one?
So for me, I'd say there's kind of three elements that probably need to be in place for a
number one, the
one-to-one.
person has to actually be there.
Yeah. Number one, the person needs to be present as well as being physically being in the setting. But linked off that is actually stick them in the diary and do everything you possibly can not to cancel them. And if you do have to cancel them, to your point, just, apologize, give some rationale so that people understand, and then look to reschedule them. Don't just leave it hanging. Reschedule it, because people then be like, fine, no worries. They'll understand. It's in the diary then, not a problem. That works for me. So, don't be a dick when it comes to the diary, would be what I'd say. Yeah. The other thing I'd say is 100% attention. So listen, put the phone away. So when I was a manager, I used to put my phone face down, right? So I couldn't see it pinging or ringing or whatever. Sometimes I'd even leave it in my handbag, if I wanted to really concentrate, if I knew I might get distracted. Laptop off. I used to go to one-to-ones. So there's if anyone's listening to this who used to be in my team, there was a place where I always used to see my one-to-ones at a golf club in Cheshire. Did a great club sandwich. Not that I ever had one, but it was a hit, yeah. So we used to, and they did great coffee. They had a great setting for one-to-ones. Everybody used to feel really comfortable there, and we'd get some really good stuff discussed and chatted through. But I often used to not take my laptop. I'd often just take a notebook and a pen. And again, this is about the simplicity of it. It's just I wanted to go and engage in a conversation and find out what's going on for that other person. No more complicated than that. And they had my full attention because I'd minimized the distractions around me in order to give them my full attention.
And created a great environment. I think that's important in terms of what you were saying before when you were talking about the example of when you've had a one-to-one with a manager and found it uncomfortable. They took you to a public place and there were lots of people around and there were other people there from a work perspective. So it was really easy for them to be distracted, and they would be distracted. They didn't manage themselves very well. They were having conversations with other people and you didn't feel as though, well, one, that you had their attention, but two, it wasn't private.
Yeah. For sure. And where we used to go, I'm not saying that everybody needs to go to a golf club to do a one-to-one. That's not what I'm saying. But as an example, where we used to go, they had a lovely garden, like patio area. So in the summer, because we'd have regular one-to-ones, they'd be diarised in the diary. At the start of each like new year, I would put them in so we all knew where we were at, and if we had to move them, then that's fine. But in the summer, we would sometimes have our conversation like on the patio, on a table, so we're outside in nature. And actually, it sounds really like people are like in nature, whatever, but actually that change of environment is very good for creative thinking. It's very good for actually unblocking things that are perhaps in your mind that are holding you back. And actually, we'd have some of our best conversations when we were kind of more in that informal setting. For me as well, personally, like I knew that worked for me because I'm quite informal. You get the best out of me in informal setting. But also I knew that other person, and I also knew that they would thrive more in that environment as well.
Well, it helps you relax, doesn't it?
Yeah. And one time, God, this is so Cheshire. One time, like Alex Ferguson was there. And they were about to he got on a helicopter to fly to Cheltenham races, and the helicopter literally landed like not that far from where we were having our one-to-one. So we like stopped, paused, watched what was going on, had a bit of a laugh about it, like talked about football for a bit, etc., and then we kind of went back into it. There wasn't this kind of rushed boom, 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 this is what we need to talk about, we need to get done, tick, move on to the next thing. And actually I would say I in my corporate environment, I'm just going to give myself a cheerlead here. My inner cheerleader is coming out. So I had some of the highest team engagement scores in my leadership team in the whole of the sales department for 2 years straight. And I would say that one of the reasons for that, one of the reasons for that was because I did simple things like that in my one-to-ones. I didn't rush people. I didn't be just all about business, all about work. I respected the fact some people didn't want to perhaps share some stuff from their personal lives or what was going on. But I asked them, how are you today? And then we would go, and that was it. Like no more prep than that from that respect. So
like invited them to talk about what they wanted to talk about and kept it an open conversation. And I know you say, well, that's easy because you were a coach, etc. Yes, I was training to become a coach, but I think just again, to your point, as a human being, I'd put that other person at the forefront. They were in control. It had to be about them. And so, I didn't want to rush that. And I wanted to create that environment for them to be comfortable and get what they wanted out of that conversation, because it's two-way, like you said. Absolutely. And I think that's the point, two-way. At the end of the day, you are in a work context and you're both there to deliver a job. You both have a job to do. But that doesn't mean that the conversation has to be one-dimensional, because we're not one-dimensional as people. We are multifaceted and there's a lot going on. And even the best of us who are there to do a job and know how to do that and are doing it well, there's still other things that are going on for us, whether that be at home, whether that be elsewhere in work. So much is contributing to how we're feeling on any given day, including, health related, family, friends. So I think those one-to-ones for me that have been the most effective are where everything is being acknowledged. Those one-to-ones where it was an open conversation that I was invited to contribute towards. I wasn't being talked at, I was being asked questions and invited to speak and share and explore some things for myself. They were the most enjoyable, and also where I was being talked to in terms of all elements of what was going on for me, and where that individual actually was showing an interest in terms of, well, how are you feeling and what's going on, and even things outside of work, which was always pleasant, because actually even just talking about those areas that I was more comfortable with helped to then talk about the things that maybe I wasn't. But that took conscious effort on my manager, and then being aware of that and having already invested in the time to get to know me to make that happen. And I suppose that comes back to my point right near the beginning. All of this requires some form of conscious effort. These things don't just happen overnight, but it is about trying things out and being focused on creating that environment for an open conversation, thinking about, well, how am I going to do that? And being prepared to ask open questions and give people the space to share and be listened to, and not just, suffocate them with your agenda at all times. So I think an interesting part of this conversation around one-to-ones is the responsibility element. Because I think I've heard so many different debates and perspectives on this before around, well, whose responsibility is it? And who is accountable for a successful one-to-one? So I thought it'd be an interesting one to talk to you about and see what you think.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. So I would say that actually who is accountable and who is responsible are maybe two different things in this sense of a one-to-one. I think who is accountable for the success of a one-to-one is absolutely the facilitator, and that being predominantly at work, the line manager, in the sense of creating that environment and demonstrating that interest, that being present, asking those open questions. And that's where engagement comes. So if you are struggling with team engagement, if you're struggling with engagement with a particular individual, all of which are really fundamental basics to them performance, then actually the kind of link to that is that for success, whether that's on a personal level, team, organizational, you have a role and an accountability there to facilitate the opportunity for people to be their best. And that means creating environments for them to be at their best and offload and share, etc., that we've just talked about. So in my opinion, I think the line manager or the facilitator is responsible in terms of the accountability of a one-to-one and how successful it is. The responsibility, I actually think, lies with both parties. So actually you are both responsible to turn up on time, to be prepared to an extent, to be responsible in the fact that we are talking about the business and we need to be responsible in the agenda items that we might share, etc., etc. So I think they're two slightly different things, and we each have a role to play. I'd say the facilitator or manager has probably more of a dual role that kind of overlaps both those areas.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, because I know in my experience, I think this comes down to like personal accountability and your who is really responsible for performance in jobs. And I think, well, it's everybody, because as an individual, if you want to do well in a job, it's about what you put in, and actually you can't put that responsibility on anybody else. It's not for them. And I think that comes down to the one-to-one. So I think the one-to-one has to be valued by everybody. I think that's a mutual. Everybody has to value it. Everybody has to make the time for it. Everyone has to protect the time. And then it's that ensuring that actually everyone's taking responsibility for how they show up to it, because you both need to be present. You both need to be engaged. You both need to have prepared to an extent. And I think you both need to think about the steps that are to be taken from the one-to-one, because I've always enjoyed a one-to-one scenario where both myself and my manager have contributed and then taken actions away to help each other, because that's that like mutually beneficial relationship, and it's us both acknowledging our roles, what we're going to do from there, who's doing what, and the fact that we've both utilized the time and that the time has been of benefit to each of us. So I do think it's a really interesting one, because I do think, like in any conversation, I guess, or in any relationship, every party has a part to play in it and is responsible. Sure. But I think it has to be some form of balance, because I do know, I've watched managers get it wrong historically, where they've set the one-to-one up. They've dictated what day it is, what time it is, where it is. They've dictated the agenda for it. They've taken the notes all the way through. They've then sent those notes to the individual whose one-to-one it was, and they've set the actions that one-to-one that individual is going to take. And then they're confused 2 weeks later when that individual comes back to the next one-to-one they've organised and nothing's happened. Now, for me, nothing's happened because actually only one person took responsibility for the whole thing. And
they're not engaged.
And the person isn't engaged. And so it is about balance, and it is about both people who are involved recognizing their role and their responsibility. I mean, at the end of the day, the one-to-one is about, typically it is about focusing on the individual whose one-to-one it is and whose time it is. And so surely that person therefore has a level of accountability to walk away and go, so what am I going to do with that time? What am I going to do with that conversation I've just had? What actions am I going to take from that? Because it's for my benefit. But I think that is nearly always fundamentally down to how it's been set up in the first place. That sort of one-to-one example I gave there with the manager doing all of the organising, all of the dictating, all of the note-taking. The fact was, when I explored it with them, they hadn't ever really considered about how to engage the individual whose one-to-one it was in terms of the expectations on them. And actually I was like, well, that'll be why that individual is not engaged. And you're actually, if you think about it, like, look at what you're doing, you're not even asking them any questions, and you're not asking them to do any prep beforehand, and you're not encouraging them to take their own notes, and you're not asking them what actions they're going to take. You're just telling them what they're going to do, and the whole thing's a dictatorship. So the reason nothing much productive is happening off the back of it is for those reasons, because actually you're not doing anything that is motivating, inspiring, encouraging,
empowering.
Empowering, that's the word I was looking for. So I think it's so important that it's recognized that actually it's about both individuals being invested and contributing. And that's what will get the best out of it. Because it's true of, all of us have a manager. Even if you're a manager, you have a manager. It's the same with your own managers, And then I think it comes back to, like, you've got to walk your talk. So you can't be saying that you value a one-to-one if you actually don't value your own, if that makes sense. Like, there's a whole layering of this, isn't it?
Oh God, this could be a whole other episode. I feel like we could do a bonus episode on this subject, like, for sure. There's a lot of tangents we could, and stories I'm sure we could share. But no, interesting question. CBeebies, let us know what you think. Whose responsibility is it to have a successful one-to-one? Who is accountable? If you're listening to this and you have a different opinion, or you perhaps agree, then please do let us know. Yeah,
drop us an email. So you've got our email address, hello@thecoachingcast.co.uk, and you can always DM us on Instagram as well.
CBeebies, it's back. Your favourite feature, Bullshit Bingo. This is where Lisa and I share and discuss phrases which get commonly used in the workplace, which, quite frankly, make us cringe. Today's Bullshit Bingo is another one from our LinkedIn network, and it is, drumroll please, can we just lean in? So, Lisa, thoughts on this one?
Can we just lean in? So in the context of what? Like, what this means, can we get a bit closer? I'm assuming.
Can we just lean into this? So I've heard this used as like, can we just lean into this in terms of focus? Let's get some focus on it. Let's get some attention on it. What are the actions? Let's just lean into it a bit more than what we're doing already. Yeah.
It sounds really like David Brent, this one, doesn't it? Like, it's like really like,
if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll have just seen me like literally lean. I just leaned into the mic there. That was a close
lean into this.
You do not want to see, that's for sure.
You can get a better look at my chin, mate. My best buddy that I've brought back from Dubai on my chinny chin.
Yeah.
I mean,
lean in.
Can we just lean in?
It's a good one.
Have you ever used it? Have you ever said, can we just lean into this?
Good question. Don't think I have. No, I've heard it being used. Definitely heard it being used. I don't think I've ever used it though.
Yeah, because I think if I've ever thought of the fact that we needed to spend more time on a certain topic, or I don't know, I just would have said, can we just spend a bit more time on this? Or can we delve a bit deeper? Now that is definitely something I would say. Delve a bit deeper. But I don't think I would say, can we just lean in? And I'm a really touchy-feely person. So This is the sort of thing I probably would say.
She loves a lean.
Yeah, like I'm quite touchy-feely. And this seems like quite a personable thing to say, but can we just lean in? I don't know. It sounds a bit annoying. Really.
Whoa.
All I can think of is like BO and bad breath for some reason.
Ah, nice.
Nice, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, if you've got any bullshit bingos that you hear in the workplace, we need to hear them, CBBs. You can send them to us on email at hello@thecoachingcast.co.uk, or you can DM us on Instagram @thecoachingcast, or even send them to us on LinkedIn, Lisa Robin Wood, Susie Hunt, whichever you would prefer. But we need to hear them so that we can talk about them on the podcast.
So upon your request, CBBs, we've been talking today about the one-to-one. So that conversation that we all experience or should be experiencing throughout our careers, either with our manager or with our teams, if we're managing people, that forms a fundamental part of our managerial relationships. So our tips and recommendations from today's episode on this topic of one-to-ones are... and we've stripped it right back. We've kept it simple because I think the fundamental theme of today is keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. So the first one is don't be a dick about the diary. So protect the time, make the time in the first place, then protect it and do it regularly. Like so many things, I think we overcomplicate them and we put them off. And the more we put them off, the worse and big they become. But actually, if we just did it more often, it would become a habit and it just wouldn't be that bad. So don't be a dick about the diary. Number 2 is be present. So once you've made the time in the diary, actually show up on time, preferably. Show up and be there. So Susie talked about removing distractions, putting your phone away, maybe not even taking your laptop. So ensure that you're fully there, that you're listening to the individual, you're listening to one another, and giving your full focus. And then the third thing is ask questions. A really great simple one just to kick things off is, how are you doing? How are you doing today? And asking more open questions, being curious to enable a conversation to happen, because fundamentally that's what we're talking about here, people. We're talking about having a conversation and connecting with one another. So some self-coaching questions to ask yourself to support you with improving your one-to-ones or doing something differently with your one-to-ones, whether that be your own with your manager or those that you're facilitating with people in your team, are: number 1, how do you rate your current one-to-ones? So those of your own that are about you with your manager and those that you have with your team members, and use that scale of 1 to 10 that I articulated so beautifully in some of the previous episodes. So 10 being, whoop, whoop, it's going really well, and 1 being, not on your Nelly. If it's relevant, ask yourself, what's stopping you from rating your one-to-ones as a 10? Thirdly, what could be improved? And what action can you take to make that possible? And the final question for you is, what one change can you make this week to make your one-to-ones more enjoyable and productive? Because the more we enjoy these things, the more we'll want to do them. Don't worry if you don't remember the top tips that we've just talked about and shared. They will be available on our Instagram page this week and also on our website, thecoachingcast.co.uk.
We hope you enjoyed today and have some new ideas to take away and try for yourselves. If you have any questions, thoughts, or feedback, we love hearing from you, our CBBs. You can contact us in 3 ways: on email at hello@thecoachingcast.co.uk, on Instagram @thecoachingcast, and finally, you can contact us through our website, which is www.thecoachingcast.co.uk.
Your support helps more than you know. So if you like what you've heard today and would like to help us to grow this podcast, please, please, please do us a favour and leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app. You have no idea how important those reviews are. Also, hit subscribe wherever you listen and give us a follow on Instagram @thecoachingcast. Don't forget, you can also watch each and every one of these episodes on our YouTube channel. by searching the Coaching Cast, and also on our website, where there are links to every single episode from the last 4 seasons, including this 5th one, and where you can watch our lovely faces.
That's a lot of viewing. That's a lot of episodes.
There are a lot of episodes. So yes, so you'll get to see all sorts. You'll get to see my mate Jim on my chin from Dubai. You'll get to see me eating the toast that you probably weren't aware of that I was eating during this episode. You'll get to see all sorts of wonderful things.
She's letting all our secrets out now.
Susie's wearing a glorious floral blouse today that is particularly nice. So you could also see that.
Well, next week's episode, if you are like what you've heard and you want to tune in again, next week's episode is all about friendships at work. We will be exploring how this can impact our happiness at work, looking at what friendships at work can look like and the benefits and struggles in forming these now we are working in a hybrid world.
We both love music and use it to motivate and energize us. So we like to finish each episode with our personal song recommendation, giving you positivity and energy as you launch into your next meeting. It is my choice this week, and I've chosen a track that I actually heard in a restaurant the other week when I was away with my husband for our anniversary. And I hadn't heard it in bloody ages. And when it came on, I was like, this is awesome. I haven't heard this for such a long time. And it is This Velvet Glove by Red Hot Chili Peppers. Sends me straight back to my festival youth. So thanks so much for listening, CBBS. We hope you have a great week. And remember, you've got this.